Hi, I'm Marcel, and welcome to me screaming into the void, mostly about books. I am doing a project where I am trying to read slowly. I've always been a fast reader because I've always read a lot. But now, due to the conversations that we're having on the platform and other social medias about how much should we read, how fast should we read, I wanted to actually test out, what happens if you're forced to read slowly. So I am buddy reading this with my mother and my sister, and I am only allowed to read 3 chapters each month. And this book is about Sophie, and Sophie is getting letters in the mail that asks her weird questions, like, who are you? And where does the world come from? The first 3 chapters are pretty much an introduction to Sophie as a character and an introduction to the letters. So that happens at the end of the 3rd chapter. And it was interesting to read this book forcibly slow, because I suddenly realized that I usually read fast, not because I want to sort of be done with something. I'm not really that sort of contest oriented, but I do want to know what's going to happen. I'm impatient. I'm very, very impatient reader. But when I sort of was forced to read only 3 chapters, it did something to my reading. I read actively slower, and I was sort of dwelling with the words in a different way than I usually do. And I found that and it's going to be quite fascinating to see how is that going to impact me going further. I noticed details in the book that I hadn't remembered, and that I don't necessarily think that I would have done, because it's the small details. I'm not sort of just impatiently going to, the letters. I need to go to the letters because I know that's when the fun starts. But dwelling sort of with everything that was going on. One of the things that I noticed, and that I actually discussed, especially with my sister, was how childish Sophie was. Now, this book came out in, I think, 92, Sophie's World, 1991. So the book came out in 1991, and she is 15 in this book. And she hides in a bush because the world is, makes noise. And we started sort of questioning how, because she didn't read like 15 to us. She read maybe like 10. And I'm not talking about it from an autism way. I'm talking about it in how children react to one another. That there is a developmental difference between 10-year-olds and a 15-year-old. In addition to how she interacts with her friends at school, because she gets these letters and they do something with her, and therefore she ends up fighting with one of her main friends. And my sister sort of has Jostein Gaarder, wonderful Jostein Gaarder, ever talked to a teenage girl? Because the way those two talk to one another is not the way teenage girls talk to one another. And I thought about it the same way, because we are introduced to Sophie, among other things, with her walking with a friend. And her friend talks about how they're talking about a soul or what is humans. So, for example, I'm just very quickly translating. Sophie Amundsen was on her way home from school. The first part of her journey, she went together with Jordan. They had talked about robots. Jordan meant that the human brain was a complicated robot. Sophie wasn't completely sure if she agreed. Humans had to be something more than a machine. So that's sort of the tone of the book. And that in and of itself is an okay start, and that's not what we were discussing. But they were fighting in a way that my sister said this is way more childish than sort of 14, 15-year-olds talk to one another. And one of the things they were fighting about was the fact that Sophie had gotten these letters and she didn't want to share the letters with her friend because she didn't think that her friend would understand how cruel they were about asking these huge questions of who are you and where does the world come from? And my brain was like, but your friend has told you that she thinks that the human brain is just a complicated robot. Dearest, she has thought about these questions. Why do you think you can't talk to her about them? Which I would have understood if she had been younger. If she had been around 10 years old, I would have understood why she was thinking the way she was thinking. But being 15, I would have assumed that you knew better than I have these very cool questions. I know that you can think about these cool questions. Let's talk about them rather than ending up fighting with you because I don't think you can handle these two cool questions. I love the book. I absolutely love the book. But I don't think Jostein Gaarder has ever been either a 10-year-old girl or a 15-year-old girl. And that's things I never would have actually thought about if I hadn't been forced to read these chapters slowly. So moving on to the next part.